Hello everyone, my name is Andre and welcome to the PDHPE Teachers Association podcast. Joining me today we have Sonja Maric, Associate Lecturer of PDHPE at Macquarie University and an education consultant in PDHPE. Sonja, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Andre. How are you?
Having a great day. I feel that this is going to be a banger. This is going to be a really, really good one. Now, Sonja, you've come from a PDHPE teaching background and now you've gone into the university space. Definitely want to talk about that. What made that transition first? Why did you decide that, going from PDHPE classroom teaching, going into now teaching teachers? That's a massive move.
It is. It's a big move, but it was always on the cards. I was always aiming to end up teaching at university level. That was always the dream. So had to take some steps to get there, and I made a couple of mistakes with my degrees. So it took a little bit longer than I anticipated, but we got there in the end. And I did 10 years of teaching as a PDHPE teacher. So I feel like I did my time.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mention that because I feel that once you hit a 10-year mark, like a decade, I feel that it's definitely, you've definitely made your mark in teaching. I think I'm coming up to my 11th year. I think 11th year as a teacher in PDHPE, and it's, you feel it. You certainly feel it as well.
Yeah.
Now, going into your role as Associate Lecturer, you've done a number of research, and there's one that I want to particularly talk about, one that you've done. It was part of your master's. It was the effective characteristics in PE-based interventions on social cohesion. And we were talking just a bit off air before. This was done during COVID.
Yeah, it was done during COVID. I think we started 2019 or 2019, yeah. And I mean, obviously we didn't know at the time that COVID was going to hit, but yeah, it went through COVID. We didn't need to do any data analysis at that point because it was at master's level. So everything that we did was theory based. And like I said off air, we were doing what we call a systematic review, which is when you ask a question, really specific question, and then you bring in all of the literature that's existing on that question, and then you do stuff with the data. So that's what we did. That was the main point of my master's thesis.
So let's break that down. So what is actually social cohesion and how does that apply in PE?
So, I mean, there's so much literature out there about the social outcomes, and we talked about this as well. And in that paper, we talk about the differences between the different social terms. But you have stuff like social cohesion, you have socialization, you have fair play, you have all of these terms that fall under this umbrella of social outcomes. And social cohesion is basically the way students get along and the way they interact with each other in the classroom. And for us in PE, that's really significant because so much of what happens in PE is dictated by the way the students interact with each other. And if they don't interact well, you're not going to have a good lesson. And if they do interact well, everyone has a good lesson. And that, includes the teacher as well as the students. So we found a lot of really interesting information about the student-teacher relationships, the student-student relationships, the student-school relationships, and, culture then comes into that. But there's a lot of research about it out there. And it's really applicable to us in PE settings because the students are constantly, comparing themselves to each other. They're constantly having little confrontations. They're constantly having to problem solve. They're working together all the time. So for us, it's really important, but it wasn't assessed. And so it falls under what we call the hidden curriculum, which are skills that we teach our students, but don't assess on. And I mean, you yourself can probably think about all of that, about all of the things that we, teach in PE that we don't tick a box for.
Absolutely. And I think you're in the same category and feeling the same way as that. Yeah, there is so much that we do unintentionally teach with the way we communicate with students, the way we help them problem solve as well.
Yeah.
I find that no matter what age group you are, there is always going to be that level of comparison, that level of competitiveness in anything. And it can be team sports, individual sports. I find it quite predominant in soccer or football, wherever you come from in the world. It's I find that football, soccer, rugby, and basketball are some of the hugest comparison individual sports. Why do you think, like from your research, why do you think young children will compare themselves often to their peers?
Well, they're gauging success. So there's this thing, and I think it was Bandura that talked about this in his theory of social learning, where students might not participate in activity just because they've seen another student participate. So what they do is they compare themselves and each other in terms of the context that they're playing in. So for example, if you and I are friends and we're doing, we're playing basketball, for example, and the teacher's giving us some skills and drills and we're dribbling the ball around or, shooting or whatever. If I see you doing a really good job, that might make me feel bad and feel that I need to disengage because you're so much better at this than I am and I don't want to make myself look bad. But it can also work positively. And if I can see that you've done a really good job, I'm like, well, me and Andre are sort of on the same skill set. And if he can do this, I can do this too. And maybe as I'm talking about this, you're thinking about specific examples you've had in your class where kids are like, oh, I just saw, Mary or Jack do this. Yeah, I can do it now. Or they're like, oh, I just saw Mitch do this and I'm not doing it because he's really good and I don't think I'm as good as he is. So it's this really interesting thing that happens in a classroom for us as PE teachers.
And the power of expert modeling as well. I found that there's been situations in my teaching where I've demonstrated skills and it's been effective to a certain extent, but then I've asked another student to demonstrate the same skill and having that idea of, well, they're the same size as me, they're the same build as me, they're the same ability as me. I think I can do that. I was laughing when you were talking about that. Do you remember in school, I remember when I was in primary school, there was such a huge social currency and social credibility on physical education or PE, especially if you're the fastest runner in the school. So I remember that if you were the fastest, you had the most social credit. And also, if I don't know if this was in your school, if you were the best handballer, if you were those two people, you were the cool kid in the school. I love it. I loved it so much. I was very okay at handball, so I was the very okay cool kid.
Of course you were.
Of course. When it comes to PDHPE teaching, and I remember I said this to you before, I said we've got a lot of information out there, and I think we need more wisdom, and you are the wisdom. What do you think as PDHPE teachers, what do you think is a skill that we must have? We've got learning theories, we've got curriculum knowledge, we've got all the game ideas. What do you think in your experience and also seeing new teachers come into the profession, what do you think they need?
That's a really big question. I think they need to be tolerant and they need to be patient. And putting all of the other stuff aside, the theories and what they're learning at university level, I think what they see when they're in the classroom or what they see as pre-service teachers and what actually happens when they're teachers by themselves in front of a classroom are two completely different things, and sometimes that can really shock them. So in lots of different ways, they need to be patient with themselves and wait until they get into the classroom to really experience what it is to be in the classroom. You have to have so much patience as a teacher, and it's such an underrated skill to have. I was very humbled when I first started teaching when I was 21. I wasn't a patient person, but you very, very quickly learn that you need to be patient. One of the other things I used to say to my pre-service or my prac teachers was that they need to develop strong relationships with the students. And that's where my research again comes in. The PE teacher relationship is almost more important than the content that we teach, because if the students like you, and you would know this because your students love you, and
you are speaking my language. This is everything I believe in right now.
Yeah, and you would, because you have such good results from your students. And again, I know that because you've worked with me at Macquarie and I've seen your student evaluations. But the student-teacher relationship is so important, because if the students like you, they're more likely to be engaged in whatever it is that you're teaching. They're more likely to like and enjoy your subject, and they're more likely to engage on those days that they don't want to engage, or using those activities that they don't want to participate in. They'll only do it just because of you. And that is so powerful, in my opinion. It's such a strong leverage that you can use in a classroom that is completely underrated, but so important. So if I had a pre-service teacher with me or a prac student, I would say, try to develop relationships with the students, even with the ones that you don't necessarily like or the ones that don't necessarily like you. Try to build a relationship, because that relationship will be important for things later on.
Sonja, I couldn't agree more. I think, again, you're the wisdom, and this is incredible. You are incredible, and this is the wisdom that we need. When it comes to teaching, I do think people forget that it is an incredibly large relationship-based role. For some students, and I'd love to hear in your experience as well that sometimes the teacher is the reason why students turn up and don't turn up. It could be you are such a powerful, you have such a powerful position in students' lives that sometimes they will only turn up because you get to see them and they get to see you. And that relationship is you can't compare that to anything else. And coming from a primary school background, as the majority of my experience, that's very evident. It's very evident. And I feel that one of the more strongest skills to start off with to build relationships is knowing their name. If you know their name, I feel that that is such a good starting point. When
so I did a thing. Can I interrupt for a sec?
Oh, of course, absolutely.
I did a thing. I went on Temu and I bought rolls and rolls of labels. They're like that big. I don't know how to describe that to people who are listening. They're sort of like, what would you compare that to, Andre?
Ooh, about the size of a large coffee cup. Like
okay, let's go with that.
That tall, so maybe 5 inches.
Yeah, so think of a label that's about 5 inches. Yeah. And basically what I did was, they're obviously labels, so they stick. I get the students to write their names on them, and I do that until I remember their names, and hopefully it doesn't take a semester. But that's one of the things that I do in every class that I teach, every single year, every semester. It's incredibly important to know the students' names, because all of a sudden it's not just, hey you, or hey buddy, or mate. It's Andre, can you please X, Y, and Z? And sometimes you'll get that reaction where they're sort of taken aback by it, but it's such a powerful tool in behavior management and student-teacher rapport and all of that. So that if you're using that strategy, and if you're learning their names on purpose, that is a great place to start.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I am big on the name tags, absolutely, and getting them to write it. Yeah. And especially when you have kindergarten students that sometimes don't know how to spell their names. It's very cute. It's very cute. Speaking about building relationships now, this is something that I've been very passionate about, and I experienced this in high school, and it's taught me a lot. And it's the whole idea of giving consequences with exercise. So exercise is a consequence. So for example, we all remember those times when you were in class, we're chatting, and then the coach or the teacher's, all right, 2 laps around the oval. As someone who is very involved in PDHPE, we fall into that trap sometimes. I am very, very careful that I never do that, because we don't want to associate exercise with punishment, because it creates a bad problem. What have you seen in that space, or have you ever seen pre-service teachers use that technique?
Can I give you a really, really terrible example that I experienced myself in school?
Yes.
Okay. As you were talking, I was like, I don't know where Andre is going with this question, but I really hope he's against this.
Oh, so against it.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Well, basically what happened was I was in one of the schools I used to teach in, and I had my students period 6 of the day. They had an English teacher in period 5. So they had period 5, then they came to my class and I had them for health. And basically they were all just really tired and red and, flushed. And I was like, what's going on? Why are you guys so flushed? And they said, our English teacher had made us run laps around the oval. And I said, why? And they said, well, we did some classroom activity and we all just performed really badly across the board. So behind the English block was this big AFL oval, and she had sent them out there to do laps. And they did a couple of laps of the AFL oval because they had performed so badly in this English task that they had. And my head exploded, because I was like, if anyone is going to use punishment against the students, physical punishment, it's us, because we're the PE teachers. Where did you get this idea from, English teacher, to get them to run outside? And it was like a super hot day as well. And, they didn't have PE uniform. They were just running in their school clothes. So I was scandalized. I would strongly advise pre-service teachers to never use exercise as a punishment. You're probably involved in a whole old school sort of approach that we were students in, where you do the wrong thing and you get 20 push-ups. No, we need to stop doing that, because we're discrediting our own subject.
Absolutely. And we can't use something that's good for us as a form of punishment. That's like, gosh, I'd be so ripped and jacked if that was the case for me, because I was always getting in trouble. But it's I never understood the reasoning for it. Is it because of that it removes them out of the space? Is it kind of like that process of, go outside or, sit in the corner and think about what you've done? Is it kind of that approach? Because I've never really understood why that's been a case.
I think it's just conditioning. I think it's
Mm.
just because the people that are initiating those those punishments were people who were exposed to that in their own schooling.
Right.
So there's this perception that, if this was what I had to do, then I'm just going to implicate this onto my students as well. I don't know. That's a really good question. That's something that you can ask if you ever hear someone doing that. As you know, I've never done that. I think it's counterproductive, and we should be really, really careful with that because, like we just said, we're discrediting our own subject, but people still do it, and it's often a little bit more older school educators that do that, or maybe people that have had a really bad experience with that themselves.
Yeah. Do you find that when it comes to that type of, I guess, consequence management, it comes from people that have had poor experience with physical activity or had poor experiences with, exercise in that space? Do you think it's something that can go away? Do you think that we're moving into a position where it's becoming very, very unusual, that type of approach?
I think it is becoming unusual, and I think that's a really, really good thing because the education is kicking in. When they're at school, not at school, when they're with us at university level, we don't do that. So hopefully those kind of behaviors sort of get phased out. But I think and we've spoken about this before, there's a disconnect between practice and academics. So there's a disconnect between you and me, for example, where I might publish papers about stuff that we're talking about, but you don't get to read those papers because there's a paywall between accessing that information. So unless I directly send it to you, then you don't get to see that really important information. So maybe people are still behaving in those ways because they haven't had the opportunity to learn anything else, or maybe they just don't have access to information that tells them that there are other ways to manage negative behavior. And it's just a really lazy way to get the students to do what they want. And it breaks that teacher-student relationship a little bit as well, which I don't think is good for anyone.
Totally agree with you, Sonja. I think we're moving away from that type of thinking. I think it's great. One thing you did mention, though, and again, it's going back to my big philosophy, is that I feel that approach also removes us as being an important figure in their education. It takes away that relationship and it builds that association of he's always going to give me or she's always going to give me exercise if I do something wrong. And then there's that whole barrier of, well, what if I don't feel it's wrong? What if you're wrong? What if you misread the situation? So again, it does discredit that relationship building, element of teaching as well. And again, it's totally underrated. When it comes to pre-service teachers, do you feel that there needs to be more training or more facilitation how to build relationships with students? Because to give you an example, the relationships that I build with my students, they range from 4 years old to 12. That's completely different to 12 years old to 17, 18-year-old. Do you think that the way we build relationships with students should be more of an explicit subject or explicit way to teach?
Well, we don't teach it at all. So we present theories, of teaching and behavior management theories and all of these other theories about, what's a good way to teach. And, we present things like cooperative learning theory and all of the theories that we've spoken about, sport education model, teaching games for understanding, TPSR, but we don't explicitly teach the students social skills because we rely on them already having social skills and then integrating those into the classroom. But again, it's under that hidden umbrella. There's a skill set that we learn and teach that isn't assessed. And for that reason, it probably hasn't got as much credibility as teaching maths or science or English, which is understandable. But social skills are life skills that the students need in the classroom and they need in life after school. So, as a teacher, we're so strapped for time, and you would know this as a primary school teacher, so strapped for time that we're trying to get through all this content because they're going to be sitting NAPLAN exams and they're trying to get into high schools and whatever, that we only address social issues when they become a problem in our classroom. So, you're sitting there tomorrow and you're teaching about, geography or something, and it's not until John and Terry have a physical altercation at the back of your classroom, that you start talking to the children about positive ways to behave, or, you know, what happened there that was antisocial, or how can we be more pro-social, or what, you know, all of these techniques that we then start to instill in them. So it's sort of like a Band-Aid approach at the moment. But universities aren't doing it, no.
I was just thinking while you're telling that, were giving me that information, I was just thinking of a situation that happened actually at Macquarie. I don't know if I told you this. And no, it's a great one. It's a great one. It was super inspiring. It's incredible the impact that we can leave on students as well with the relationships that we do build. And I feel that there are elements that we have to teach that communication skills by modeling it. You know, we model turning up, we model being compassionate. And I think as PDHPE teachers, we're in such a good window where we see so much resilience building. Like, PE is hard, like doing PE is hard. And I think we get to see them in such vulnerable moments and celebrate them overcoming them. I remember teaching my very, very first school, my first year of teaching. I was teaching in a primary school at the Northern Beaches, and there was a group of year 6 students. It was a massive group, and really enjoyed it. Always, you know, they were my highlight of the week. Loved that class. Years pass, started working with Macquarie University, and a name popped up. And I thought to myself, that name looks very familiar. I don't know where I know them from. And the short of it is that they said, you know, hi, Andre, you may not remember me, but I was one of your students at that school. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember you. And she said that you're the reason now I'm becoming a teacher. And I was just blown away. This was my first year of teaching. And, you know, as you know, I've been teaching a long time now. So to have this so many years gap in primary school to now this person becoming a teacher, it really highlighted the fact that, you know, we leave such an imprint on them, whether it's, you know, who we are, how we communicate with them. It's the small memories that we leave with them. And that's why I'm so I'm so pushy when it comes to building relationships with their students, because at the end of the day, you don't know where they're going to turn out. You know how you're going to turn out. You don't know where they're going to go, and you don't know what kind of memory you're going to leave them. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. I love that story. No, you haven't told me that. I love that. I wish you told me. It's beautiful, isn't it? Like, I say to the students now, like these education students that we have, that they will never know the impact that they have on their students, because so few students will actually tell them. And you lose touch, you don't see them again, they move on, they go and do things, but they'll always remember you. You may not always remember every single one of them until it's pointed out to you, but they will always remember you. And one of the unfortunate parts of teaching is that your impact will probably not be known to you ever, which I think is quite sad, because it's such a rewarding job. And if we knew, maybe we would be more inspired, and maybe we'll be more motivated, and maybe less teachers will leave the profession because they're burnt out. But our impact is so underrated, and it's so sad to me that you know, teachers will never know the impact they've had on their students until, you know, you see them at Woolies 20 years later.
Absolutely. And they remember you, and they remember how you made them feel, or they remember those moments that seem so insignificant to you, but for them it was such a massive, massive moment. And I think that's one of the blessings of our role, especially in PDHPE, is we get to see those incredible moments. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, Sonja, that brings me to my next question. I know in university there is a significant focus on high school PDHPE. It's a whole subject. It's a whole course, rather. Do you feel that primary school PDHPE gets left on the side? Do you feel that there should be more of a focus, if not in a PDHPE degree, 50-50? What do you think?
Well, I teach the primary course at Macquarie, and we only have one PDHPE specific unit, and it's done in 3rd or 4th year. So it used to be 4th year for us, but now it's 3rd year, and it's very, very limited. We don't have a lot of time with the students because they go away on prac. So we actually don't have 12 weeks of intensive teaching anymore. We only have, you know, 4 or 5 or 6 weeks. We'll see what we end up having this year. But you taught the course with me in previous years, and it was only 4 weeks of 4-hour tutorials, which gets us the hours, but it's not the same as having 2-hour tutorials for 12 weeks. You know, it's just a lot easier to have that structure. But yeah, just one. one unit on PDHPE in 3rd or 4th year, right at the end of their learning. And by that point, they've been so, what's the word? They've been, you know, conditioned to teach maths, English, science, and all of our now planned subjects, that when it comes to creative arts or PE or, you know, geography, for example, those are the sort of secondary subjects that get missed, and then they don't have the same emphasis on these subjects as they do on those big three. So we've already almost lost, and it's really hard to engage the students. But in saying that, and you would know this as well, they love that unit. They love playing games and, you know, all of those little bits and pieces that we put in there, the warm-up games, the invasion games, the minimal equipment, the ease of access that we put into those that unit. And the students really, really, really enjoy it. So I wish there was more, but I don't see it happening. Yeah, I don't see it happening because we've got such a congested curriculum as it is at university level.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it is such a shame, because it is such a fun career path as well. You know, coming from someone who's been in that realm for so long, it is such an enjoyable experience as well. Sonja, I'm just looking at the time. We are certainly running short, but thank you so much for your time, your expertise, your wisdom. I think we've taken away a lot of practical skills from this as well, and just a way to think as well. And I think it's really, really valuable having you here. Thank you so much.
No worries.
I do appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll have you back again. Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
I'd love it.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone. You've been listening to Andre and Sonja, and this is the PDHPE Teachers Association podcast. We'll see you later.